Hello, everyone. I'm Dora Petrani, Global Co-Head of the TMC Tech Media and Communication Sector Group at CMS, which is a law firm. And it is a great pleasure to welcoming here Francesca Rossi with us today. Francesca has a background in computer science, has contributed to advanced AI research for about 35 years, 25 of which in academia in Europe, and then at IBM in the US. At IBM, she's also the AI Ethics Global Leader. She's also a board member of the Partnership on AI and a steering committee member at the Global Partnership on AI, where she's one of the 3 experts appointed by the US government. She's also co-chairing the OECD expert group on AI future and has been a member of the European Commission high-level expert group on AI that was used as a basis for the EU AI Act. She's currently the president of AAAI, the International Association of AI Researchers. Francesca, a warm welcome to you and thank you for accepting our invitation. We will talk today about AI, which is a very hyped topic, if I may start like this. I ask you to start with maybe a little bit of update. You have had an extremely busy summer and autumn. You have been speaking on many conferences, and there is a lot to read about actually your speeches. But I'm very much interested in what you regard as highlights regarding AI over the past couple of months.
Thank you, Dora. Thanks for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. Okay, in the past few months, I think that, of course, the trend about, especially for a company now, in understanding how to use generative AI for our clients, of course, and for many kinds of application. As you know, IBM delivers technology to other companies. So we have been, in close, discussion with our clients to understand what can be useful to them in using generative AI for all their internal operations and services. So that's, the increasing trend on generative AI, which resulted in the building also of an IBM large language model that we are using, but also of a platform that is called Watson X, that is a platform that can be used with any large language model to build an AI solution on top of this large language model, a specific AI solution. So we also have been doing internally a lot of work in evolving our AI ethics framework to account for the expanded and new risks that generative AI and large language model bring about, that are expanding some of the well-known AI risks and concerns like fairness, explainability, transparency, privacy, and so on, but they add other ones because of the capability to generate content. I've also been working with, as you mentioned, some external outside IBM, multi-stakeholder organizations like the OECD. So, for example, yesterday there was a meeting where we have, I'm co-chairing an expert group of the OECD on AI futures, and there we try to envision what the future could be with AI by describing some desirable and undesirable futures, and also by building a taxonomy of the risks and the benefits of the future of AI along different dimensions. For example, how important the risk or benefits are and how actionable they are. So how easy it would be to act to mitigate those risks or to achieve those benefits. So that's one thing. And another thing that I recently did also is this participation in a meeting on AI safety. So there is increasingly, with more and more capabilities in AI models, there is increasingly attention about these additional risks that I mentioned earlier about misinformation, about misuse, about deep fakes, about so all the new risks, and also some long-term more long-term risks about AI. And so you may have seen that the UK had an AI safety summit, that the US, the White House also published this executive order from President Biden about AI safety. And so there is an increasing trend in covering also these other risks which previously were not in the landscape of risks, but now they are, some of them, and they may require an evolution of the AI ethics frameworks from the companies, from the regulators, from all the actors in society.
I know that you also attended a very special visit at the Pope recently, talking about the renewal of the Rome Call for AI Ethics. Can you tell us a little bit more about this very special visit?
Sure. So this was so the Rome Call for AI Ethics is a document that was initially published by the Pontifical Academy for Life in February 2020, just before the pandemic started in Rome, and it's a document that includes several principles that should be used and values that should be considered when building and using AI. And some of them are the usual values that one would expect, no? Like human-centeredness or inclusion, that nobody should be left behind, or education of everybody, and even lifelong, or so responsibility and so on. But at the beginning, in February 2020, was signed by two companies, Microsoft and IBM, and several other institutions, mostly, like the European Parliament, the Italian Parliament, because we were in Rome, and several other organizations. Here, in 3 years later, so 2.5 years later, so in January 2023, we went back. And this time we met with the Pope as well, who gave a 10-minute speech on AI ethics and the value of using and building AI in a way that is centered along, human beings and humanity. And that was very historic meeting, because the Rome Call was signed by the 3 Abrahamic religion, so the Muslim, Jewish, and the Catholic, of course. And that, I think, it was the first time that these 3 religions were signing the same document together, and with regard, to the right approach to a technology. And so IBM and Microsoft renewed the commitment, and we described what we have been doing around those values and those principles in these 3 years, and what we plan to do in the future. So, but it was very, nice that, we met the Pope. We were inside the Vatican for this meeting, and we saw how, he's interested into this, in this approach to the technology, which may seem, something that is a bit far from what a Pope or a religious, leader can think about,
Thank you, Francesca. And actually, you gave so much food for thought for our discussion later. So I will try and cover as much as we can during the hour. AI has been with us for many decades, and actually, you've been researching it for quite some time. The first AI-like phenomenon. There are always disputes how far we can go back, but certainly many decades. But with the generative AI tools especially, I think it's fair to say that what used to be more niche and more for the expert eyes, but more and more louder expert eyes and expert ears, it now reached really the main stage, and it's on the front page of many dailies. Everybody is talking about it, even the taxi driver is talking about it. To me, it's quite fascinating that 3 years ago the Pope did the Rome call, which actually shows how future thinking that institute is, as what they did with the human-centered nature is extremely important when we talk about AI. But now, as we are at the main stage, I think it's also fair to say that, and you also mentioned that we have old risks, and many of the, can I say, early documents and early calls regarding AI and ethics and AI's principles were addressing the old concerns regarding bias, discrimination, transparency. And there is now a new wave of concerns as well about truth, about accuracy, and about security and safety, just to mention a few. How do you think, do you agree that we had what I would say the usual suspects regarding AI and ethical questions, but now there seems to be a new wave and a new set of questions arising in the recent months?
Yeah, definitely. So, as I said, that the fact that these models have this capability to generate content expands some of the well-known risks that we were considering earlier with more traditional AI approaches, because, for example, the issue of bias can be not just in the decisions that are made by classifiers or models that do predictions and so on, but it can also be in the content that is generated, in the pictures, in the text. So it's an additional place where bias can show up. So to say that is, so explainability was already something that was challenging with more traditional machine learning approaches. And now, since generative AI is based on unsupervised learning rather than supervised learning with the humans labeling the data and the examples in the training data, then it's even more of a challenge. And it's the challenge, the additional challenge is also dependent on the fact that these models generate content, so the provenance of this content is not easy to trace. So the large language model generates a piece of text. Where is this piece of text coming from? And that's not easy to do this traceability. So some of these are two examples of issues that were well known, but now they are expanded. And then, as I said, that there are phenomenon of so-called hallucinations, so that the model can generate content that is not true, but it looks very plausible, and it can generate content that is not true, even if everything is in the training data is true and correct. And because of the way they are built and because of the way they combine together different elements of the training data. So we have to remember that these systems are not built to recognize truth from false content. They are just built to generate one word after the other one, in sense of large language model, or one pixel after the other one, in the case of text to image models, in a way that every next word is the most probable word, given the context, given the words that have been generated in the past. So this is the only things that they're trained to do well. And even if that's the only thing that they're trained to do well, they can master very well the natural language. No? But it doesn't mean that they have a perfect model of the world, which would take care of generating only true and correct content.
Yeah, given the fact that we not only have true and correct content available, even for the input on the input side, we cannot really expect. I believe it's very, from a legal perspective, it's very important, interesting to see how actually different authorities take different approaches when it comes to protection of the users, to raise the awareness about, for example, hallucinations and about the limitations that the currently available models have.
And then, as you mentioned, is also the copyright issue, no? And
yeah.
not only copyright, but so copyright in the training data that can make the model generate content that is protected by copyright, but then this generation does not trace to the source, does not mention that there is a copyright protection in the content that is generated, and also this comes from copyrighted information in the training data, but also it could come from the prompt, no? The prompt, what the user writes in giving an input to the large language model, because especially because if this input is confidential information like code that is proprietary of a company, for example, no? And then is put in the prompt, then this could be used to retrain the system, and therefore can be used and generated to other users. So then it's not protected, you know, it's not it's shared with others, and it should not be shared. And that happened because of people maybe not educated enough of what could be done with the data that they write in the prompt.
Yeah, I also think it's important to see that this is a very global issue. And you mentioned the UK Safety Summit, which is a perfect example that 28 nations in the end signed the Bletchley Declaration. There are so many cultural and societal differences in our very beautiful world. When it comes to AI and the use of AI and the feeding of AI with data and with inputs, we also need to be very mindful of these differences. When it comes to a couple of these key principles that literally every organization that I'm seeing is highlighting about AI and ethics especially, it was very encouraging to see that now there seems to be a global agreement around these overriding principles like safety, like human-centeredness, just to highlight a few.
Yeah, so for the first time, China was around the table in a discussion about AI ethics and safety at the UK AI Safety Summit, and signed together with the other countries this declaration. And this is I think it's a very important step, because that was the first time. But having said that, of course, the agreement on some principles does not, and is reasonable, that it does not mean that the same laws or the same approach is used everywhere, because of course we know that there are different cultures, that implies that there are different priorities among the values to be embedded into AI. I just think about values of individual privacy versus societal harmony. So in some cultures, one is more prioritized with respect to the other ones. In some other cultures and countries is the opposite. So, and also we always had different legal systems, but not just with China, but I mean, even the US and the European Union have completely different legal system. And we've seen that also now in trying to regulate AI, because in Europe we have the European AI Act that is very close to be approved, and it's a law that will be applied to all the member states, while in the US we have the executive order, which is not a law, but it just tells the various federal agencies how to follow up with possibly laws, no? And so it's a completely different structure of the legal system, And for example, in the US, we have seen many laws around AI, but coming from states or even from cities, even from the city of New York. So it's a much more scattered approach that not necessarily has this uniform way of dealing with AI, for example, or other technologies. For example, Europe has the GDPR for protecting privacy. The US does not have something similar to that, does not have a privacy protection law like the GDPR. So we cannot expect that things are completely uniform at every level. But at least there should be some discussion about what are the main principles and agreement in what we want to embed into this technology when we build it and when we use it. Because of course, these principles should come from society and not from individual companies that decide what values should be embedded, right?
Yeah, and you are absolutely right about the differences. And actually, these differences do define also the role of the regulation. As a lawyer, I am always fascinated how different parts of the world take totally different approaches to the same approach. I've been always working in technology and innovative areas of law, and probably this is the reason why I like regulation which is the least intrusive and at the same time provides enough regulatory certainty for all the parties involved, and that not only includes those who are developers but also the potential users of such new technologies and innovative approaches to general solutions. And one of the fascinating things is, and this is the same, actually a very, very similar challenge than what we saw with GDPR in Europe, which is a single approach across the European Union, but still only in one part of the world. And when it comes to, for example, population, this is a very small part of the world. So what we have seen across the GDPR is how it affects competitiveness of European ventures and how it actually goes back to the very traditions of Europe's approach to individual values, as you say, right, to privacy, especially. Given the fact that AI is very much data-centered and data-focused at the moment, let's emphasize at the moment, we can see also a very similar approach in the European Draft Data Act. What we also see is an approach which I welcome very much is the risk-based approach. So how you approach it from a risk basis. But even when you look at the definitions, already on the definition level, there are so many questions. And when you think about the fact that you have Europe on one hand, and then let's pick the US, let's pick Africa, and let's pick China, just to take a look at how governments would potentially be approaching the very same questions, it might well be the case that such a fast regulation can cause harm to those who want to do business in those particular jurisdictions, as opposed, and not necessarily protecting those values that you want to see being viewed. So I know, and I have read that you say that less is more. I totally agree, less is more when it comes to regulation. But when it comes to new technologies, it's also very important to probably educate the audience and set some basic rules or to confirm some basic rules, especially about risks, risk awareness, reliability, and safety. And these are also included now in the Draft AI Act, and I very much welcome that approach. So any thoughts on regulation and the role of regulation? I always caution and against over-regulation.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the regulation is needed, but of course it should be done in a way that, say, addresses the real risks and does not impact, on innovation and competitiveness of a country, where the regulation can be applied. I mean, the region of the world, in this case, the European AI Act. So definitely, I mean, I like the risk-based approach, saying, I'm going to put more obligations where there is more risk. And where there is low or no risk, I'm not going to ask you to do many things. So that's a good approach. And also, I like the fact that the risk is associated with the uses of AI and not with the technology itself. So using AI in this list of 8 or 10 high-risk scenarios, like in healthcare or in HR or in education, or so that's where the risk is, because only when you know how you're going to use AI, for what you're going to use AI, you can understand whether it's high risk or not. AI is a technology that can be used in many different ways. Some of them may be high risk, but many others are low risk. So it doesn't make sense to regulate and define high or low risk the technology per se. So it makes sense to focus on the use cases. And I'm saying this because instead, there is some attempt to move upstream from the use cases to the technology, especially with regard to large language models and these kind of more open-ended models that can be used in many different ways. So on some amendments that I've seen proposed, there is the approach of saying, well, if the technology can be used in high-risk ways, then it's high risk, and it should go in under all these obligations of high risk, which I think it would be a big mistake, because it would really stop innovation. So, companies in Europe, especially small companies, if this amendment is approved, would not use large language models. I mean, especially in low risk applications, because then they would have to go into all the obligations that are for high risk scenarios. So again, I would focus on the
use cases.
AI Act calls the AI system. So technology with the specific purpose to be used, and not AI per se. Also, if you focus on the technology per se, you are not really going to be very future proof, because as we have seen, the technology evolves very rapidly. So if you focus on the current technology, in 2 years, then there will be another form of AI or evolution of the technology that you're not covering. So that's why you should focus, which was the initial, which was what the initial draft, was doing, really focusing, also because it was like mimicking some product-based regulation that focuses on the product rather than on the pieces that you use to build the product, and looking at the risk or not in the final scenario and the product.
Yeah, when we talk about the product, I totally agree with you that we should have that approach. To me, always the biggest challenge is that you're absolutely right. In 2 years' time, we don't know what's going to happen. But what we know for sure is that even the AI evolution will be at a totally different stage than currently, as these curves are quite in a hockey stick mode, and I believe that we still haven't peaked, so we can expect more, given that we have just started to see all the potential for the large language models and the foundation models, which are now to be allowing the vast opportunities for other use cases, and emphasis on use cases. So when it comes to regulation, this is my other concern, that even if we had the AI Act ready in Europe in this year, it would only enter into force in 2 years' time. And actually, those who are developers would need that preparation time. So it is for a reason that it is such a long period of time. But this is why you should be very, very careful when you pick the right topics to regulate. Otherwise, you might end up in regulating something in a very niche form, which no longer exists or is easy to circumvent within 2 years' time. Technology, in my view, is always at least 2-3 years ahead of law. And that is when we need to use our common senses. We need to go back to old principles, ancient Roman times, or even before, like how to trade, not to kill, love. So literally all the basic principles that I believe are very important to cherish and to protect also when it comes to technology.
Yeah, another thing also is, Dora, that is not that some people think, oh, we need this regulation because right now there are no rules.
No rules, yes.
It's not true, because there are many. For example, IBM has a lot of clients in the financial sector. The financial sector is very heavily regulated, or even healthcare. The healthcare sector is very heavily regulated. Whether you use AI or not, there are some things that you should not do. So the fact that you use AI maybe requires an adaptation of those regulations, but it's not that there is no law at all. So that's why another possible approach would be to adapt these sector-based regulations to the fact that now there is AI being used there. But I think that we should start completely from scratch.
Yeah, I believe that I agree. When we talk about sectoral regulations, one of the key challenges might be actually that all the sectors would look at a common denominator, which is like the overall regulation, and then start deriving the sector specifics once that one is ready. So I still do think, and I totally agree, that the highly regulated industries already have highly regulated environment around them. And actually many of the existing rules do cover also protection against abusive AI use cases. So let's not use illegal, but abusive use cases, which would to a certain extent intervene with the main principles of the operation of that sector, of that industry. That could actually also help with the globalization and the global challenge, how to introduce any regulation nationally or regionally, when these questions remain still very global questions, and applications are available also globally. So let's just switch a little bit back from regulation, as we discussed that regulation might not be the ultimate answer to all the questions. So what else do you think we can do to take, let's put it this way, the best of AI and also mitigate the risks around it?
Yeah, so I really think that, regulation is needed, done well. Just one ingredient of a big, of many complementary mechanisms, to ensure that technology is used in the right way. So companies have to play their part, so with internal processes, auditing, even, so governance, internal governance, and also standard bodies, international standard bodies are we have seen in the past that they are very useful in creating some harmonization and even forcing the companies to do something in a certain way, as well as there are also, I see also a lot of market forces that, for example, our clients, just because they are usually in very regulated environments, they ask us, what are you doing around bias? Show me that you did the right tests and they passes this threshold and this. So there is also pushes that come from the market, from where you are going to deploy your technology, that want to make sure that the technology has the right properties, or that there is some assurance that it does not behave badly, and you have to show in some concrete way what you are doing, what you have put in place internally, and how you can ensure that the technology has the right properties, the use cases are assessed depending on the risks. That's also something that we do, for example, every time there is a use case, so that a team prepares solutions for a client, and it wants to sign the deal with the client. But before doing that, it always comes to the AI ethics board for being assessed, and in terms of the properties of the technology, but also the way the technology will be used and deployed. Whether it's inclusive deployment or not, whether the user is educated enough to use that technology in the appropriate way. So there is a lot of work that the companies should do to educate internally, but also the clients and the partners. And that, I mean, it cannot be just replaced by regulation. So also because it moves, as you say, much faster, and the companies can evolve much faster in all these internal processes than regulation.
I think one of the challenges is that bigger entities with lots and lots of resources are able to set up the ethics board, to follow the rules and set up the principles. And I do think also they bear the responsibility to lead by example and actually showing how this is correctly done. And Microsoft and IBM is many times mentioned as the two sort of leaders in this sense. On the other hand, what I see is that, you know, when you have an idea and you're like a smaller entity and you're in a fast growth startup, let's put it this way, startup mode, this is when it can become extremely dangerous.
Yes, I agree, because again, you need a lot of pieces, and the technology is the easiest of the pieces when you build an AI solution that is responsible and what positive effect. You know, building the technology and is just the easy part. The most difficult part is really to understand how to build it in a responsible way, how to use it in a responsible way, and that requires, first of all, it requires more than just technology to do the test, but also it requires a lot of internal culture change, you know, in developers, in all the people working in the company that need to understand. For example, when we defined initially a playbook for our developers to tell them how to build an AI model, doing bias testing and other things, some of our developers could not really understand. They said, what is this bias? You know, what is this? So maybe some of them were saying, oh, but in my model, I don't have any protected variable, so I don't have any feature that has to do with people. So bias cannot occur in my model, right? So they were not aware that there could be some proxies like zip code or others that are very correlated with the protected variables, and so they can you can have bias, and so you can create discrimination with your model even if there is no feature corresponding to human beings. So we saw that really building the playbook and building the tools was just the first step, and we needed to really help these developers change their culture, change their point of view, educate them, and also help them understand that they could not just talk among them as technologists, but they had to talk with other people that could help them you know, understand the societal impact of what they were doing. That's why I think it's so important to have a form of education which is much more multidisciplinary than we have now. For example, in Italy, that I know well, the even university system is very silo-oriented, you know, like you study computer science, you study only computer science, and you have nothing about, then, somebody else will study, sociology, philosophy, psychology, and so on. And of course, you don't have to become a philosopher or a sociologist, but you have to be able to understand the impact, the possible impact of what you're studying and what the technology that you're building and so on. So that multidisciplinarity, I still don't see it in Italy. And I think also when you want to do a career in academia, if you start being multidisciplinary, the evaluation doesn't work very well, because you say, oh, you don't have enough in this area and not enough in that area, but they never look at the overall thing. So I really think that culture and multidisciplinarity is important also. And when
and when you realize that, I think the first big step is to realize this. The second is all about education. We discussed that. So I'm certainly not an education expert here. So all I can say is that the call for action to increase any kind of digital literacy is still not too late, and we are still lagging behind in all continents. And I do think we should start at the beginning, but not only with the youngsters, but with the generations who did not grow up with the smart tools with their hands. And actually that is also probably the biggest challenge, because they might take things at face value that the younger generations will not necessarily do. They might not know how is their own data used, or they might not care that much what happens if they input something into their devices. So that is when education at all levels for all ages is also very important.
Also is also to make these companies understand that investing in AI ethics, in the tools, in the time spent to do the tests and so on, which may seem just as a slowing down the ability to deliver technology, I think it also adds value to the technology itself and to the company itself, because it may be also a business differentiator for them to be able to say, no, I am, even anticipating the European AI Act, and I'm developing and delivering technology that is done in the right way. So this is a challenge that I understand that it may be a challenge. We have seen it even internally at IBM. Teams were at the beginning a bit scared to come to the discussion with the AI ethics board, because they say, oh, the board is there and is going to not allowing me to sign this deal with the client. So they were seeing the board as some dangerous entity for them. But then I think that with efforts, we improved in making them understand that the board is there to help them do a better deal for us and for the client, not to just not allowing them to sign a deal with the client to deliver the technology that they build. So I think that and also the path that large companies like IBM and others have done in AI ethics, with a lot of lessons learned, evolutions of the framework, can also be useful to these small companies, so that they don't have to go through these years that we went, but they can accelerate and the understanding and lessons learned, and they can apply it immediately without, like, I don't know, at IBM, first we didn't have an AI ethics board. We had a discussion group, then we have an advisory board, and then we had a decision-making board. So we went through a lot of evolution over the years, and now companies don't need to do that because others have done it.
So I still don't see any questions on the board, unless I'm mistaken, Francesca. So can I encourage everybody in the audience, and I know that there is many people in the audience, that if you have any questions to Francesca or me, please use the question arrow, and then we'll see the questions right away with the help of Anna. And while we are awaiting some questions, I wanted to arrive to the final part of our discussion. So let's talk a little bit about the future. And as much as I see we are at a very interesting crossroad or milestone of the evolution of AI, because we have now we now know what the technology can do, and now it's about the use cases, how actually to see the full potential. We are far away from seeing the full potential. There are some people who talk about doomsday theories and how they see this is the end of humanity and how it's the end of all jobs. And I'm a natural born optimist, so I'd like to think they're all wrong. And actually, this is just a better way to actually improve our humanity, improve the society if we use it well. So this is one of the aspects that I wanted to talk about. And the other aspect that I wanted to talk about is that it's something that you have mentioned in your very recent speeches, and that is the fast and so differentiation between fast and slow collaborative AI concept. And I find it fascinating. So maybe you can share it with the audience, and hopefully they will also find it fascinating. So let's talk a little bit about these two aspects.
Yeah. Okay. So so first of all, as you said at some point, the technology right now, AI, is very useful for many different applications, but we know it has a lot of limitations, and also it raises a lot of issues because of all these limitations. So some limitations have to do, as we mentioned, of the fact that large language models, for example, don't distinguish between true and false. Okay, and then this is, in some situations, some scenarios, very important. Instead, you don't want, you want to make sure that what you get is true, and you can recognize the true or false. Otherwise, the whole even the legal system is going to be disrupted.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So right now, what developers are doing to try to avoid this behavior of toxic or hallucinated or abusive content generation is by using some techniques that are in a pipeline. So are techniques that after you build the large language model trained on the training data, you do these other techniques, like one is called reinforcement learning with human feedback, trying to avoid that it generates content that you don't want to be generated. And that's a form of a patch to some problem that doesn't resolve the issue. In fact, you may have seen that there are ways to bypass this thing by writing very carefully crafted prompt that generates this unwanted content. So definitely the techniques that we have right now to make sure that the technology behaves in the desired way are not ideal. They are very primitive. And so it would be definitely much better to have these guidelines embedded into the system when you train the system on the data, so that it only learns to behave in the correct way. And so this is not what is there yet. And so that connects a little bit with this idea of a fast and slow AI that my research project is about, where we try to get inspiration of how humans succeed in behaving according to some values and some principles, and the way we do it, that's the fast and slow thinking theory, is that we have these two broad modalities of reasoning. One is the fast thinking, which means very almost unconscious decision that we make every day for very simple problems. We do things almost automatically, and problems that we don't need to think about it very carefully. And others, like the slow thinking instead, that requires all our attention and all our conscious cognition to solve the problem. And we know how to mix the two, how to combine the two, how to use one or the other one, and how to switch between one and the other. For example, there are problems in which we start with the thinking slow, meaning like when we learn how to drive, for example. But then after a while, we switch to the thinking fast. We do it almost unconsciously, all the pedals and all the things that we do when driving, or even riding a bicycle and so on. So we know how to combine these two to acquire information and knowledge from data, from our sensors, from the world, transform it into knowledge that then we use to make conscious reasoning and decision. This is still not present in AI. Current AI just learns from data, period. A lot of data, but data. So it acquires information from implicit knowledge, the knowledge that is embedded in the data. And then it tries to derive something, and in particular, a neural net tries to adjust the weights of the neural nets to have a behavior that reflects what has been learned in the data. But this is all implicit knowledge, while explicit knowledge of the thinking flow modality is not there yet. And many think that this is what is needed to give AI, to remove some of the limitations that also generate some of those risks and hallucination, and not being able to distinguish between true and false, and not generate content that is undesired, and so on. So but it's not clear yet, and there are many approaches, many different approaches to do that. The approach of our project is to really get inspired by these theories, cognitive theories on how humans make decisions, and how humans self-regulate themselves, no? Like, I don't know, maybe with my thinking fast, I want to eat, like, I don't know, the whole jar of cookies, but my thinking slow tells me, the doctor says I should not do that, and I'm not doing that. So how, we self-regulate also according to some values or some health reasons or whatever it is. And this is still not there into AI. And so again, there are many approaches that try to move towards a more a situation in which we embed these capabilities to AI rather than trying to patch, the behavior afterwards.
And this is when I believe it will be even more important to acknowledge the cultural differences, the societal differences across the globe. As when you talk about these slow thinking methods, this very much goes back to your routines, your everyday behaviors. So when it comes to teaching AIs to adapt this slow thinking, you will have to teach them probably in different ways, in different continents, in different countries. We have now a couple of questions, and I believe we have quite a few questions. So let us try to pick a couple. So so Francesca, do you mind I read out some, and we can save the rest. Maybe we see who asked the questions. We can go back to them also later in writing. But one of the questions is actually about this, that I totally agree that AI is not just a technology issue, but rather a cultural, societal, and educational one. Can you share any actions or initiatives that you know of that are addressing this 360-degree approach?
Yeah, so just an example. So IBM is a founding member of the Partnership on AI. So the Partnership on AI has about 100 partners now, of which only 20 are companies, and then all the other 80 are all the other stakeholders, meaning universities, research labs, civil society organizations. So that's the first thing that one needs to do. So not only different mechanisms, but also different people involved in designing the right mechanism to, drive the technology in the right direction. And so, for example, the Partnership for AI, in this multi-stakeholder way, recently released the guidance for foundation model deployment, which addresses many of the issues that we have been talking about. So what one should do while developing, deploying, and even post-deployment to make sure that they're so. And if you look at this guidance, it has a lot of things. It has technological mechanisms, it has social consultation, it has regulation, it has so many different. So there's one example that shows you that really. I mean, these organizations understand that these are socio-technical issues that need socio-technical solutions.
Yeah, and I would like to add an unusual suspect, as I really like the UNESCO's approach to AI. And so if you go on the UNESCO homepage, you find a lot of calls, a lot of publications, a lot of announcements and notices on AI, especially on education, on ethics. So I would recommend also the audience to browse that. One final question, and then unfortunately I have to close, and this is a very technical question. Do you think frontier AI safety can be addressed using kill switches?
One of the long-term concerns is in AI safety is that if after deployment you discover that this AI model has some bad behavior, let's say very simplified in this way, then you would like to terminate it. You would like to stop using it, possibly. That is under that reasoning is behind this idea of the kill switch. So you would like to be able to terminate, so have to embed in some sense in the software or even in the hardware something that cannot be removed by anybody. Of course, this requires some. I mean, I would say that this is more than a kill switch. I think that what is needed is a very well done risk management framework. This is done also in many other technologies, like in cybersecurity, for example. What is in place is a very strong risk management framework. Nobody can assure you that things are 100% safe in that space, but you have to put in place, to mitigate the risk. You have to put in place, anticipate, but also when something bad happens, a risk management framework that can address that. So to me, the kill switch is in the long term, and I would, which I'm not sure, first of all, if it is feasible doing it, hardware or software, and also it has to do, it also interacts with the idea of not be in favor of open source, which I am in favor instead. And so I would use rather other mechanisms to address the risks.
Thank you. I totally agree. Never forget. I would have also said that probably kill switch is an overkill, and let's find other common denominators. With this, unfortunately, the hour is up, and I would like to close our discussion. Thank you once again, Francesca, for joining me for the discussion. I would like to close our discussion with a quote from you that I totally wholeheartedly agree with. So let's leave this with the audience as a motto for our discussion. If we focus on our humanity as we create our technologies, our potential is unlimited, because the ultimate goal is not to improve AI, but to improve us as human beings through the advancement of AI. So thank you once again, Francesca. Thank you, audience, and talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.